Welcome to the SeizeYourBusiness.com podcast. My name is Kevin O'Flaherty from O'Flaherty Law. My co-host Jim Wazak from Success Enhancement couldn't be here today, but I'm thrilled to be joined by a returning guest, my good friend Keith Hoffman from First Advantage Mortgage, and today we're going to talk about what you need to know about credit. So, Keith, thanks for taking the time to be with me today.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. There's a lot of things to know, and I think it's important everybody get to know a little of it.
Well, let's start by talking about you and your background. And I know you've been a guest before, but for those who haven't seen the previous episode we did, which I think was our third episode, tell us your story.
Well, I've been in the mortgage business about 23 years. Started in the business all in Illinois, and worked for a small company. Well, actually, it wasn't a small company. It was a fairly middle-sized company for a little while, and then I decided to go into business myself. So actually, I worked for a small brokerage company for a year, and then bought into the company that I'm in now, although we have sold it since then. But First Advantage, I've been with 16 years as of May 1st.
Okay, so as a loan guy, you probably know all about credit. So that's a question I get asked in all the different areas of law I practice, and it's a tough question to answer. And I usually will consult someone else to answer those questions. So I'm glad to learn about that today. What do we need to know as a business owner or just an individual about our credit score?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing is you don't know everything about credit. Even though I know a lot about credit, I still don't know everything about credit. The one thing that I figured out is that, doctors use x-rays to look inside of people and figure out what's going on. In the mortgage business and in the banking business, we look at their credit scores. And it actually is a good representation of their financial wherewithal and what to do and how to do things, and are they a good credit risk or not.
Okay.
So the first thing I'll let you know is that there are 3 credit bureaus in the country. There's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.
Okay.
And each one of them have their own models. So what they do is they start at a high number and they come down based on your credit. So for instance, Experian uses their system called Fair Isaac V20, which doesn't mean anything to any of us.
That is a random name.
But their scores range from 320 to 844.
Okay.
TransUnion uses a different model, Classic 04, and their model goes from 309 to 839 as their high scores. And then Equifax uses a thing called Beacon 5.0. That's their most recent system. And theirs goes from 334 to 818.
Okay.
So you can see there's a variance between them. And so when you get credit scores given to you, you wonder, why is there a difference? And the reason is they have different models that they use to figure it out.
That's kind of strange. That's kind of like, I'm a former gymnast. That's kind of like the judges, judging someone's high bar routine based on different standards and trying to unify a score after that. I didn't know they were using completely different models and they had different high scores.
Well, and they use different models, but they use basically the same items to deduct scores. So, for instance, and I had to write this down because it's pretty diverse. Basically, what you're doing is if you are maximum limits on your credit cards, you have a $5,000 limit, you're at $5,000. They're going to take anywhere from 10 points to 45 points off of your top score.
Okay.
When you have a late payment, 30-day late payments, between 60 and 110 points are deducted. So you can see these things start to add up. So everybody starts at this big number, but based on which credit bureau is reporting it, their models show something a little different.
So that credit card, I've been told you're supposed to try to at least maintain half of the maximum balance or less on your credit card.
And that is true. I think, they're using a new number of 35% now.
35%?
So that's the capitalization, the utilization of your credit cards they want as a low amount.
Okay.
Because what's happening is people are getting more and more credit cards. So if you have 50% on every one of them, it's going to be a little different than if you have 35% on each of them.
And when is that judged? Is it judged at the time they're running the report, or do they look at a 6-month history of what you've been maintaining?
It's every month. Every month that they report based on whatever that last month's transactions were. So if you had a credit card that was $5,000, you put $5,000 on it. Now you have $10,000. and you make a payment of $3,000, most likely next month it's going to show $7,000.
Okay, and so when that report's run the next month, you're not penalized for the previous month having your credit cards maxed.
No, not necessarily. The further away from those things that you go, the better it is.
Okay.
There's 5 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have to double check. There's 5 things that actually make up your credit scores. It's a mix of different things. 35% is based on your payment history.
Okay.
Do you make your payments on time? 30% is your capacity and how much you owe. And so that goes back to the 50% or 75 or 100%. So 30% of your scores are made up of that. 15% is the length of how long you've had these. So if you open a credit card 5 years ago and you've made great payments, you want to keep it open because 15% of your scores show that you're going to make your on-time payments.
Okay.
10% is the credit mix. What type of a mix do you have? Do you have a mortgage? Do you have a credit cards? Do you have a car payment? Those are the kind of things that makes that up. And then 10% is the new inquiries or the credit that you've established in the last 12 months.
Okay, so for the credit mix, I assume there's good type of debt and bad debt. So debts are rated in different ways. So I assume having a mortgage is rated better than having a credit card balance.
Right. They actually will not tell you exactly what it is, but they rank them as the mortgages are the most important. Secondly would be installment loans, a car loan, a boat loan. Then would be credit cards, and it would be major credit cards versus secondary. So like the Shell and the gas cards, those are below the store cards.
Okay.
And so there's a good mix of them that you have to have. And they won't tell you exactly what the perfect mix is, but we can see if you have a mortgage, you have 1 car payment, you have 2 or 3 credit cards within that mix. That's probably a good mix for anybody to get good scores as long as you make your payments on time.
Okay. And let's say you just bought your car outright and you don't have a car payment on it. Does that hurt your credit mix because you don't have that in there, or does it help it because you don't have that?
It doesn't help it and it doesn't hurt it.
Okay.
What happens is you're not establishing credit if you don't have any payments.
Okay.
So, when my parents, your grandparents were, starting their life, everybody wanted to pay cash for things. And that was great. But in our day and age right now, what we want to do is we want to establish credit. So we do need some credit as long as it meets your personal financial obligations. You can make your payments on time.
Okay. So let's say you've got hypothetically a couple credit cards and maybe you've got $15,000 in your credit limit. Is it better to keep it below 35% and use those cards but pay them down every month? I know that's not a negative, but is it better to do that than to just have the available credit and not use it and just kind of use your debit card?
Part of that mix is that they want you to use your credit card and see that history of being able to pay it.
Okay.
So what I say for some people who, for instance, want to get a mortgage and they don't have a lot of credit, they can establish some credit and go out and maybe put on $25 on a month and pay it off next month. And then put $25 or $35 next month and pay it off. So you're keeping your balance low and you're showing your history of being able to make payments. And that does increase your credit scores.
Okay, and so the next factor after the mix that you mentioned was the inquiries, and you said a 12-month history. I think that's what you said. What do you mean by 12-month history? They're just kind of looking at your 12-month payment history, or
right? Every creditor reports to each of the bureaus, and they're going to report every month. So they're going to show how many. Have you had any 30-day late payments, any 60-day late payments, any 90-day late payments? Obviously, the further out you go for late payments, the more they're going to deduct in your credit score. But we always want to see a history of a length of time. So, for instance, I've had a credit card, one particular credit card for, let's say, 20 years. Mm-hmm. I've made my on-time payments. That's a great piece of my credit. On the other hand, if I had a credit card that maybe I didn't want to pay or didn't pay on time, that may be one that I want to close because I want to get rid of that history, even though it's going to be there for a length of time.
Okay. And so there's this 12-month look back period. If you miss a payment, does that missed payment drop off after 12 months as long as it's been resolved?
No, in fact, I had to go back and research this and how long it's going to stay on there. So if your credit card accounts are reported, they're going to be reported for 10 years from the last time it was reported.
Okay.
So, even if you didn't have a credit card, if you had a credit card and you didn't pay it because you didn't have any bills for the last 3 years, it's still going to be on your credit for 10 years. Credit cards not paid as agreed. Obviously, some people run into situations they're not going to pay it as agreed. That'll last for 7 years from the first payment that was due.
Okay.
Late payments are on for 7 years. Collections are on for 7 years. Judgments and paid tax liens are on for 7 years. And as you know, as an attorney, if you have an unpaid tax lien, it will be on there until it's paid, and then you'll wait another 7 years.
Okay, but even within that 7-year window, the farther away in time you get, the less of an impact.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So when someone comes to you and their credit's not quite good enough, you mentioned buying or getting a credit card and just paying it off and using it $25 a month. Are there other strategies that you can give to people to repair mediocre credit?
Yeah, the first thing I want to tell you is that you really need to monitor your credit. You need to look at it. And the government has they've set up through the Fair Credit Reporting Act that they have to allow you to get a free credit report every year.
Okay.
And it's really based on accuracy. You want to be able to make sure your payments and your creditors are yours, that they're yours, not somebody else's.
Okay.
So every year you can go on to annualcreditreport.com.
Okay.
And you can ask for a free credit report. What I suggest is, since most bureaus are set up with every creditor, you run a credit report maybe one day with TransUnion. And 4 months later, you do Experian. And then 4 months later, you do, Equifax. Mm-hmm. And therefore, you can actually see what your credit looks like. Now, they're not going to give you the credit scores. But what they will do, and you have an option to buy it, which I'm saying you really don't need it, because why do you need your scores unless you're going to go out and buy a car or buy a home?
Sure.
But you should do that to see whether it's accurate or not.
Okay.
And it's real. I've done it myself, and it's really informative. It tells you everything that you need to know.
So, and you may or may not know this, but if you've disputed debt and something is thrown on your credit report that a debt is in collections, and maybe you never knew about it, or it's wrongful, what do you do to clear that up, or is there anything you can do to clear that up?
Well, you can go. There's two ways to do it. One is go directly to the bureaus. You can put in a dispute online. Then they have to contact that creditor. And they only have, I believe, 30 days to do that. Okay. They need to get that corrected in 60 days. And so what's going to happen is they're going to contact the creditor, and they're going to have to either show proof or find out why that's wrong. The other avenue is to go the other way. You contact the actual creditor themselves and go that route and say, this is a problem, this is not correct, here's the proof, please correct it. And then they have 60 days to correct it. Okay.
So what else do people need to know about credit? Anything else you want to share with me today?
Well, the one thing that I did look at is kind of an interesting fact. When you talk about credit scores, the average score in the United States is 634.
Okay.
Now you can see that's considerably lower than these high 800 numbers that everybody's looking at. Mm-hmm. Here in Illinois, we are 636. So we're not much over the average, but we're still a little over the average. The one thing that I've seen is that Mississippi is the lowest at 607.
Okay.
And Alabama and Arkansas are next at 615, whereas New Hampshire is 659. So you can see the average really doesn't vary a lot. But what I'm finding is that what affects your credit may be, linked to unemployment. You're getting laid off and so forth. How are you going to make your payments? Have you decided to file bankruptcy? Mm-hmm. Therefore, this is going to affect your credit.
have you dealt with much with bankruptcies on credit reports? Because I get questions a lot from my bankruptcy clients. How is the bankruptcy going to affect my credit? And the answer I usually give them is that usually by the time you come to me to file a bankruptcy, your credit score is already in the toilet because you've been missing payments, you've got foreclosures going on, and it's almost better to file the bankruptcy, wipe everything out, and not have that continue to be on your report so that your credit report can kind of repair.
Sure.
Has that been your experience, or what do you? What are your thoughts on bankruptcy?
We first of all, bankruptcy was set up to allow you to get through a mistake in your life financially. Mm-hmm. So they have, as you know, three. They have Chapter 7, which wipes out the debt completely, and Chapter 11 and 13. 11's for the business, 13's for personal.
Right.
But those two are repayment schedules. So if you're going to get a mortgage, there are programs that allow you to do that, but you have a waiting period. For instance, if you were doing a Chapter 7, you could do an FHA or a VA loan after 2 years.
Okay. From
discharge. So that's not a long period of time. You have to wait 4 years from discharge for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So those are conventional loans.
Okay.
If you do a 13, it's 2 years from discharge or 4 years from dismissal. So they really vary between conventional and FHA or VA, but you are able to get a mortgage. Now, what I'm going to say is that if you're going to file bankruptcy, then you need to change your habits and make those mistakes no more times.
Sure.
Because what's going to happen is we need to have them establish new credit. How do you do that? You can do a credit card that's, you can put $500 up, for instance, like with Capital One. Now you have a $500 limit. You can never go over it because that's what they allow.
Sure.
You can get a car loan. Of course, anytime you have a bankruptcy, it's going to affect your interest rates, especially in mortgages. I've dealt with a number of them right now, in the last couple of years especially, and they've done their waiting periods and they have started to establish their credit. But based on their credit, it's in the low 600s or mid 600s because they can't get to that point right away.
Sure.
So it takes them a little while.
All right. Well, Keith, if anyone needs a loan or wants to talk to you about credit, how can they reach you?
Well, they can reach me a number of ways. They can do it by emailing me at keith.hoffman@1amllc.com. They can phone me, 630-306-LOAN, 630-306-5626. Or they can visit me at 701 East 22nd Street, Suite 125 in Lombard.
Okay. And you have written some good books on horse racing, too. I know we didn't really discuss that. We were going to do a Derby episode, and you wanted to talk about something a little more relevant to business owners. But how can people buy your books on horse racing, and what are they about, if you want to plug those?
Well, I'll give you two of them. I've written two books, Smarter Bets the Exact Way and Inside the Sport of Kings. Two different books. The first one tells you a little about how to bet exactas and how to pick your horses. The second one is Inside the Sport of Kings, so it teaches you a little insight. We've interviewed owners, trainers, jockey agents, announcers, and both of them can be found on Amazon.
All right. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
If you want to reach me, you can, to schedule an initial consultation, call 630-324-6666. That's my office, and we do free consultations. But also check out seizeyourbusiness.com, where we've got about 65 or 66 podcast and video blog episodes. And we're doing now an audio and video version of our law blog, learn-about-law.com. So if you want to learn about legal stuff and not business stuff in a podcast or video format, you can check it out there. So thanks so much for watching or listening, and thank you, Keith.
My pleasure. Thanks.